Okay, so I am recording. Amazing. So for everyone who does not know, this is Jeff Pearlman. He is our advisor. He's been our advisor, I believe, for 4 years now. I think when I was a
Yeah.
freshman, you started being our advisor with Jamie.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
weird.
he's been with us for a while. He's dealt with us. He is an amazing sports journalist as well as an author of, I believe it's 9 New York Times bestsellers. And he's just yep,
Oh
there
my
it
God,
is.
Luca, come on now.
There it is.
Oh,
Luca's actually
Luca, you
Jeff's.
either hold them all up or none. You don't just go one. Oh,
right.
Luca's Jeff's biggest fan, and that's how they met. So it's great. But anyway, um, Jeff basically is here to just come on Wednesdays. He comes and he critiques us. So if you would like to join, that is every Wednesday at 12 p.m. But today we were just hoping to kind of go over some general tips and tricks, some things to keep in mind when you're writing your stories. And with that, Jeff, please take it away.
okay. First of all, any questions, whatever, wide open. I was thinking about something when we were just talking right now beforehand. And a lot of the best stories. So I used to I was a baseball writer at Sports Illustrated. That was really where I sort of cut my teeth. And a lot of the best story ideas just come from conversations like this. And like Katie just said before, she's like, I thought as soon as you said this, I was like, that's a great, not just a story, but a lot of stories. Like the social weirdness is going to follow this. At some point, we're not going to be wearing masks and you're going to be walking into the Starbucks on campus and it's going to be really weird. That's going to be really weird. That's a great story, with a column on the side, like flying, the awkwardness of flying is a great story. The awkwardness of Zoom is a great story. Like you could literally do an entire issue called the COVID awkward issue and just make it all about the awkwardness of all the things you're going through, will be going through via COVID. I mean, it's insane the number of stories. And so I guess I don't want to make it about myself, but well, let me ask, how many of you guys have any interest in being journalists, like going into journalism or media of some sort? Give me a hand. Okay, fair enough. So I'll say first, it's the best freaking job in the world. It's the best job in the world. It's great. I went like you guys, I did not go to a journalism powerhouse. I went to the University of Delaware. My first job was as a food and fashion writer for a newspaper in Nashville, Tennessee, where my job was basically reviewing food products and writing about fashion, two subjects I knew nothing about. Then I became a high school wrestling writer. And then I got hired at Sports Illustrated. And my job at Sports Illustrated was literally to fly around the country and cover baseball. And you go out I was in New York. So you go to you call the Dodgers and be like, I'm coming out to write about X player. Okay, you want to go out to dinner with them? Great, blah, blah, blah. Flying here, flying there, writing about baseball, the best. And then I got tired of that. And I took a job for a year and a half at a newspaper in New York called Newsday. And my job was to roam New York City and just find weird people to write about. So literally I would roam the city. And for an example, one day I was walking by Ground Zero. And this is when after 9/11, obviously. And there was some guy, a homeless guy playing the flute, playing patriotic songs on the flute. And I was like, that's a great story. And I just went up to him. I'm like, hey, I write for Newsday, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, I'll talk to you. And we're literally walking. And as we're walking down the street, he reaches into a garbage can because he sees a half-eaten sandwich and picks up the sandwich and starts eating it. And I'm like, I could buy you lunch. He's like, no, this is just as good. And though the beauty of journalism truly is like, it's not just flying to a baseball game. It's walking with the flute player at Ground Zero and being able to ask him any questions you want. And there's no other job in the world, if you were curious, like this job. You can ask people, you just have this invisible badge around you where you can ask any questions you want. It's the greatest freaking thing ever. And now I write books. And the thing about it is like, everything is a story. Like that's the whole trick of it all that people don't get. Like people are like, I really want to write about Mike Trout. I really want to write about Lady Gaga. I really want to write. And it's like, you don't get it. The guy sitting next to you at the coffee bar is just as interesting. And you guys have all around you these really interesting stories. And I feel like the first thing I want to just get out of my way here is like, in your search for stories, especially as young journalists, a lot of times you get confused and you think I need to find the big story. And a lot of times the big story is right next to you. It's sitting on a plane and having a guy with a mask dangling from his thing. It's walking around and wondering when is this awkwardness ever going to end? It's the professor who goes duck hunting in his days off. It's the person in your dorm who has habitually picks his nose, like whatever. It's like, there are a million great stories out there, a million great stories out there. And I have found one of the great tricks for my career is, instead of looking for the big, you find the little and you make it big. So you find the little, a guy without a mask on the plane. Well, this is kind of an interesting story. I'm going to do a piece about flying and maskless people and why do they do it and blah, blah, blah. You go, all of a sudden you go on Twitter or whatever your social media of choice is, and you ask, do you know people who fly without masks? And then you're interviewing people who fly without masks. Or I'm going to do a story about the awkwardness of going to a coffee shop for the first time, and you start talking to people. There's just a million great stories all around you. And at this point in your life, at this point of where you are in journalism, while like you want the Panther to be a great college newspaper, you really want, you want both, but you want to have as many awesome clips as possible. That makes it a good newspaper, but you want to have as many great clips as possible. So if right now, are all you guys in Orange, or are you all over the place? Like, raise your hand if you're not in California right now. Anyone? Okay. Like, are you all, how many of you are in Orange? Oh, all right. So like, I just think like there are a million great stories to be written just in Orange right now, right? I said this like on a meeting a while ago. Like, there's that Australian coffee shop that went out of business. It's next to the pie shop. It's around the corner.
Aussie Bean?
It's gone. It's dead, right? That was somebody's dream. Like, that business was somebody's dream. Maybe it was, I don't know if that was a franchise. Did you like that place, Katie? Is that why you're at?
No, sorry, my friend told me something really, really weird that I just thought about that would be an interesting story. And she told me that she found out that the Pie Hole was like selling like chicken wings like through like DoorDash, and like to pick them up, because she was a DoorDash driver, and so she had to go to the back door, and then she just picked them up and delivered them to someone. But on DoorDash you can advertise your restaurant as like any name. So like for businesses that maybe are struggling under one name, they can advertise something else with a different DoorDash name. So there's just like a pie shop selling chicken wings on DoorDash.
That's an insanely awesome story. Like, that's a great story. And like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of the best stories are stories like Katie would be like you'd be telling your friend about that. And you wouldn't necessarily think of it as a story, but a lot of times those are the best stories, right? Something you're telling your friend about. Those are the stories. So that's a great fucking story. Like, that's a great story. And I was just like, someone opened the Aussie Bean, whatever it was, 3 years ago, put all their money into it. That was their dream. I'm going to open this coffee shop. And it died during COVID. Like, that's a great story. The death of a dream. You can, in fact, I swear this is how my head works. All right. Like, this is exactly how my head works. Let's take the Aussie Bean. Here's the Aussie Bean. Okay. So, number one story of the Aussie Bean, someone owned this place. It was their dream. It died. Okay. You could literally do a piece on the impact one place and the trickle down of an impact of one restaurant. So you take the Aussie Bean, someone's dream died. Okay. Bam. There's a profile. This person who owned the Aussie Bean and their dream died. Someone is renting out that space, and no one's going to rent that space right now. So somewhere there's a landlord who you can easily find, who right now is screwed because he has this empty spot that's not going to be filled for years. And Orange real estate is expensive. So someone lost that. Then whoever the three baristas were who were working around the clock, I'm sure like that's not a glamorous job. It's not a high paying job. So you have these baristas who work there, and now they probably can't get another job, or they're, like, it's hard to find work right now, as you guys probably know. So like, and then there's the fourth story, is that there are these people who love the Aussie Bean and thought it was the greatest cup of coffee in the world. Now they're stuck going to Starbucks. So like, think about, like, my whole thing is like, it's almost like tick, 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 tick. All right, here's this thing. What are the stories I can write about this? How can I expand this? What can I do with it? And you should always be like, you take the small. All right, Aussie Bean, small, it's just a business. What can I expand off of that? And that applies to everything. There's the Starbucks on campus. I mean, that was the freaking hub of activity at Chapman, the hub of activity at Chapman. I'm sure there was somebody who worked there. I think I remember this, but I could be wrong, like who was older, maybe like in her 60s or 70s. I have no idea, right? Well, that barista doesn't have a job right now, right? That's 73-year-old Gladys who wanted to work there because she wanted to have access to kids and blah, blah, blah. Right now, she's home watching Days of Our Lives, like bored out of her mind. That's a great story. you know? So you should be walking down that main street in Orange and being like, all right, that's a story. You could do an entire issue on how this has impacted Orange, an entire issue called The Death of Orange, and like the different stores, how it's impacted antiquing, how it's impacted the pie hole selling chicken wings, like you could literally do a whole, so like, just think the number one thing it's truly is think way outside the box of your normal thinking. The normal way young journalists are taught to think is, all right, I'm going to do a story. I found out that there was an arrest last week, so I'm going to do a story about the arrest. And the lead will be the Chapman Police Department arrested 3 people last week for blah, 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 blah. And what the creative journalist does is he thinks, wait, I want to do a breakout story on one of those 3 who was arrested, because there was a 17-year-old kid who was a high school student who was slinging crack. And I want to do a story on that guy. I'm going to go knock on that person's door and see if that person will talk to me. Like, that's what makes greatness. And what you guys want heading off into the real world is you want your clips to just sparkle. And you want people to look at it and be like, I don't know, I have this kid who he's a student at Syracuse, and Syracuse has this amazing journalism program, but there's this kid at Chapman who's writing this wildly creative stuff, and that's what I want to go with. So like, for all of you, I beg of you, first and foremost, like, think outside the box, think creatively, write about funky stuff. No story is too crazy. And the second thing I'll say, I don't want to babble for too long, is when you're writing, and I actually feel like you have a really freaking strong crew of writers, Jasmine. I really do. I think the writing is really good. What you guys want to do, truly want to do, is take risks in your writing all the time. You do. You want to take shots. I always said this, sports isn't really going on now, but I always said, like, if I were hiring a sports writer and I was looking at college writers, the one person I'm not hiring is a person who leads their story with, Chapman beat Irvine 22-15 in soccer yesterday. John Smith scored 2 goals. I don't want that shit. I want the blood. I want the smell. I want the sweat. I want the atmosphere. And that's the same with a pie shop. That's the same with everything. Like, you should go for it every single time. You should never mail in a story. You should take shots. You should try being creative. You should try being suggestive. You should try being emotional. Like, go for it. Just go for it. And it's not going to work 70% of the time, right? It will not work 70% of the time. My college clips are the worst shit in the world. It's ridiculous how bad it was. Poor taste, poor judgment, inappropriately, like all kinds of stuff, but it's worth trying. And those 30% of clips got me in the business. The 30% where work got me in the business. I don't know. Jasmine, why are you smiling?
So Katie and I were both thinking about Luca did a Lord of the Rings lead-in that I was debating so hard whether or not to cut or not, related to the provost selection at Chapman.
Wait, did you cut it or no?
No, I didn't cut it.
I didn't cut it.
I didn't cut it. No, because I thought it was a great lead. So it's definitely unconventional, but going off of what Jeff said, just trying to find different ways to tell our stories and really pull the reader in. So yeah.
I gotta find this. I have my favorite lead of all time. Let me see if I can find this. Was I actually put this thing. So a few years ago, I edited a book called The Best American Sports Writing. And I wrote my whole introduction about great writing was about this lead. Okay, here it is. I was a student at the University of Delaware. Okay. And this guy wrote a review. Do you guys know the New Kids on the Block? I know I'm dating myself here. New Kids on the Block? Anyone? Does nobody know who the New Kids on the Block are? Sam, nothing? They were the worst boy band of all time. And they came along in like the 90s, late 80s, 90s. It's actually good you don't know. And they came out when I was in college at the student newspaper. They came out with a new album. It was their comeback album, and it just sucked the worst. And we had this writer named Greg Orlando. This is his lead, okay, to an album review. It goes, somewhere in Asgard, Loki is screaming. He has a right to, one supposes. The Aesir have bound him to a cavern, trapped forever like a fly in amber. From a hole in the ceiling, a steady stream of acid is dripping down, poised to strike the chaos bringer on his evil forehead. His lovely wife, Sigyn, is the only thing standing between the god of mischief and mortal agony. She has a cup, you see, and catches the acid before it can hit. Alas, the cup runneth over from time to time when his wife goes to empty the container, ... And then he wrote, somewhere in Delaware, I am screaming, and there's nary a cup for miles. The new kids on the block are back after a 3-year hiatus, back to face the music. A most heinous day of reckoning it is. And he wrote this lead, and I was like, what the? And I read it like 5 times, and I just freaking loved it. I loved it. And I later showed it to my editor at the Nashville Tennessean where I started, and she's like, I hate this lead. I don't know what he's talking about. But then she hired him. Like, so you should like, just think outside the box, right outside the box, take chances, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't know how to do it, like just give it a go. And the other thing I'll say, like, and I know it's like, everyone's like, oh, okay. And then they don't do it. You need to read good writing. Like you actually need to read good writing. Go to the WashingtonPost.com, go to NewYorkTimes.com, read good. It could be fiction. It could be nonfiction. Like you have to read good writing and pay attention. Like when I was your age, which makes me sound like Grandpa Joe here. Like I would read Sports Illustrated, I swear to God, and I would pay attention to the transitions, to the word choices, to the flow. I would read it out loud. I would hear the beat, you know, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Like you can hear that shit if you read out loud and you're reading really good stuff. So like you become a better writer by reading good writing. I swear to God, and paying attention to it, not just skimming past it, but reading it and paying attention to it. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Jeff was saying about how with sports writing, anyone can say, you know, Chapman beats so-and-so with, you know, this versus this, like anyone can write that. But in order to kind of make yourself stand out, not only as a journalist yourself, but with the work and the stories and the storytelling that you're articulating, the best way to do that is to take the risks that Jeff's suggesting. So if you have any questions about if what you're doing when Luca did the Lord of the Rings lead, if you have any questions or you're wanting to kind of intro your piece in a different way that's unconventional, just run it by us.
Also, I just want to say, like, how come you guys, Jasmine, this is a criticism. How come in your features section, you only have one new story over the past, like, whatever?
They have just been so many entertainment stuff. And now finally this week, we do have a balance of features and entertainment.
Oh, okay. I forgot that you divide them. Okay.
Yeah. So we have features and entertainment. They used to be one section, but now features is more profile-y and entertainment. There's just a lot going on with this past week with Dodge College, film student productions and stuff like that. So all that's in the entertainment section.
Oh, that's cool. Wait, is Lauren here? No.
Lauren is not here. Yeah. Her piece was great.
She killed it.
Yeah.
And she interviewed Bryan Cranston. It's her first week on the Panther, and she interviewed Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Is it bad? I've never seen an episode of Breaking Bad.
That's very bad.
I don't think so.
What can I tell you? I don't know. I don't have any questions or thoughts or anything at all. Anyone?
What are some circumstances? Oh, sorry, Luca, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what are the circumstances? Because I was, especially with harder news stories or news stories that you feel like shouldn't have as much wiggle room with being creative. Do you have like a line to determine whether or not you can kind of be more, you can like veer off the path of harder news if it's a more serious story or anything like that?
So the thing is this, like, let's just say hypothetically, here's a good example. Let's say you're writing about a rape, an alleged rape. All right. So that's as like hard news as you're going to find, right? An alleged rape. So let's say the story is blah, blah, blah. Some Chapman professor allegedly raped a student, and you have all the information, and maybe you interviewed the student and she tells you the story and whatever the case, right? So you really have two choices there. You can write a straight news lead, you know, a Chapman student accused, blah, 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 of raping her, sexually assaulting her on Tuesday night. Or you are allowed to write a lead like, she still remembers the feelings of his hands around her wrists. It's something she thinks she will never, you know, it's something she says she will never forget. The room, the blah, 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 blah. That's what Sally Smith, the 22-year-old, whatever, senior, recalled Tuesday night. Blah, blah. Like, you're allowed to do that. You just have to do it tastefully. You know, even if you're writing about a court hearing and you're writing about like a murder trial, your lead can be, you know, a jury convicted so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. Or you could be like, he sat motionless, you know, He sat motionless, his blue eyes, blah, 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 staring, at the ground, inches away from the woman accusing him of killing her husband. She wanted something, a smirk or an acknowledgement, but all he would do is stare down. Blah, 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 blah. Like, you're allowed to do that. And I encourage that. I really do. And again, it's not always going to work, but like where you guys are, you're supposed to be trying all that stuff. It's just important. So I don't really think it's more about taste than should I be creative or should I not be creative? Should I look outside? You should always look outside the box and find a creative way to tell the story, but tastefully done. Yes. Luki, you got something?
Yeah. So obviously kind of one of the ways to write a really good lead would be to, as you said, just like take a moment and essentially like a really small moment and then make it bigger later on. But like in using like imagery and things like that to really like make a moment kind of come alive. But when you're in an interview setting, do you have tips on kind of picking up like those moments from people that you're talking to and how to really go in and dig at like, get them to really describe the moment essentially?
Totally. All right. So like I'm working on a book now about an athlete who hasn't played for 30 years, right? So you're trying to take something that happened 30 years ago and you're trying to bring it to now. So if someone's telling me a story and he's like, the guy's name is Bo Jackson. There's like, I used to drive Bo Jackson to practice every day. And I always be like, all right, this may sound like a dumb question, but do you remember what kind of car you used to drive him in? It was a Buick. This may sound like a dumb question. Do you remember what kind of Buick it was? Yeah, it was a Buick, whatever, LeSabre. Do you remember what color it was? You're like, yeah, it's a brown Buick LeSabre. And when you ask that much, they start getting it. And they'll be like, yeah, it's a brown Buick LeSabre. It's funny because the car always smelled like rust, whatever. The car always smelled like so-and-so. And I got it from my dad and the seat didn't work and blah, 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 blah. So all of a sudden you have this image of like a car. It doesn't have to be, the image doesn't have to be, you're allowed to recreate sort of an image, So you're talking to whoever, I don't know, name a celebrity, you're talking to Miley Cyrus and she's telling you about like when she was 4, you're interviewing Miley Cyrus and you're like, when's the first time you remember singing? Oh, I was probably 4. Well, what do you remember about it? I was in my house and I was in my room and my dad had locked me in because I was punished and I just started singing a song and it was the first song. And do you remember what song it was? Oh yeah, it was You Are My Sunshine because I love that song. Really? Why do you love that song? Well, my grandpa used to sing it to me when I was a kid, so that meant a lot. So do you remember your dad coming into your room? Oh yeah, because he was shocked that I was singing and blah, blah. Well, all of a sudden you have this scene to use. So it's just about asking and asking and asking. And my whole career has been made off of details, little tiny, tiny, tiny details. What room was it in the hotel? What color was the wallpaper? What color was the car? It gets so freaking annoying to people, Well, what was the waitress's name? What was the so-and-so? Do you remember what you put in your coffee? All those little things, they really, truly are the difference between like really good writing and meh writing. Like when I read stuff, and I'll tell you, all right, real quick, my greatest moment of my career, reporting wise, there's a guy named Walter Payton. He's the NFL, I don't have the book here. He's the NFL's all-time rushing leader. And when he was, he won a Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears and he had a Super Bowl ring. And years later, he was helping coach a high school basketball team. And one day they have a big game on Monday. And on a Friday practice, he talks to the players and he says, listen, you need to trust each other. You need to trust each other. And he takes off his Super Bowl ring from his finger and he gives it to the captain of the team. And he says, I trust you with this ring. You take it home this weekend and bring it back Monday. So the kid takes the ring home and he has a party that night and he's passing the ring around. And at the end of the night, he's like, all right, who has Walter's ring? And nobody has a ring. And the kid's freaking out. And on Monday, he has to come back to practice and tell Walter Payton that he lost his Super Bowl ring. And he's terrified and Walter Payton's horrified, but he tries putting on a good face. Okay. You fast forward like 5 years. Walter Payton is now dead. There's a kid at Purdue University with a couch. And his dog is digging at something under the couch. Digging. What are you digging at? He thinks it, and he looks, it's Walter Payton's Super Bowl ring. The kid who had the ring had a couch in his basement at the party with a hole in it. And this friend of the family went to Purdue. He needed a couch. The family had this old couch in the basement. They gave the couch to this kid. And the dog's name that dug the ring out was Bailey. And I always think like knowing the dog's name and writing that the dog's name was Bailey makes that story a million times better. And whatever kind of dog he was, I don't remember, chocolate lab or whatever. Like, so you always want to find the name of the dog. It was Bailey. That's very sad. He returned it to Walter Payton's wife, and she had no idea he'd lost it. And Walter Payton was dead. So he never even got his ring back. But Bailey was the name of the dog. So always ask the name of the dog, what kind of coffee they're drinking, everything. What is that? I'm interviewing someone via Zoom. What is that, Luca? What is that in your background? Or so-and-so, what do you have in your fridge? Or blah, blah, blah. What kind of music you're listening to? All those little details make the difference between a good story and a great story. Factually. This is the awkward silence of Zoom now. Yeah.
And when it kind of comes to narrowing it down, because I know, especially with just obviously journal, like college reporting, people having interviews, the length and the time, when do you decide whether or not you should continue veering into those details versus when you feel like, oh, now I should go back to kind of more of the original questions that I had kind of drafted prior to?
No, it's not really like, well, first of all, when you're interviewing people, the number one most important thing is it's a conversation. It sounds dumb. You want them to forget you're interviewing them, which I know is theoretically impossible, but you want them to forget you're interviewing them. And you do that. Like, I never have a notepad with me. Never. I mean, I never have like a list of questions and I'm like this. You have to listen to what they're saying and respond to what they're saying. The worst thing in the world, and I've seen this happen a million times, is like, and that's when I knew my mom had cancer. So when did you move to Detroit? Like, that's the worst thing in the world. You can't have that, right? You need to respond to what the person is saying. And if you do that, it doesn't really work the way you're saying, Jasmine, because it's like someone says, and that's when I knew my mom had cancer. And then you say, well, what kind of cancer was it? And he says it was lymphoma. You say, well, when did she first know? Well, blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 whatever. What's your relationship with your mom? Well, she's my best friend and blah, 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 blah. So like, it's not, there's no moving on or not moving on, they all should be conversations, and you may not even get all your questions in. You're going to have the best interview, a much better interview if it's a conversation than if it's you asking off a list of questions. So I always go in interviews and I know my shit, and I might have a notepad to my side with information I know I want to ask, but I never have a list of questions ever. Yeah.
And kind of shifting to a different type of question, what is your best advice for someone who is interviewing someone who may be apprehensive in just their position? For example, like if they've been caught or doing something they weren't supposed to do, there's like rumors about it, and you're just obviously asking about their side, wanting to get their input, but they're apprehensive going into the interview. What are some of your tips and tricks for that?
So first thing I always do is we always want to remember that people are human. And people are going through things, and even if they're assholes or horrible or blah, blah, they have to go. Like I always say, like, we had a lot of discussions last year about Lisa Sparks, who was the crazy dean who left, right? And like, she was awful and ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. She was also a mom of like 2 or 3 kids. Like, she can't be, like, she's still a human being, like, so I always try to remember that. And if I'm interviewing someone who's like going through a tough time, I'm always like, before you get started, like just between, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you holding up? How's it going? And maybe they're like, oh, it's been the worst. Like, I totally get that. How's your family handling it? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you want to form a human connection with people the best you can. And just always remember they are people. And the other thing is, like, if you really want to help yourself in an interview, know your stuff before you go in. Like, if I'm interviewing someone, I want to be able to say to them, oh, you're from Long Island? My wife is from Long Island. I literally just had that happen today. I talked to a pitcher, a guy who pitched in the majors, and he's from Long Island. I was like, oh, my wife's from Long Island. Oh, what part is she from? Blah, 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 blah. Like, it's good to know little things about the people you're interviewing and being able to drop that, because it shows you did your research and you actually care. It's not just disposal. The worst thing in an interview is be caught off guard as an idiot, And also the worst thing is to ask someone when you should know this information, how old they are, where they're from. Like, you need to know that stuff. I mean, you should know that stuff in most circumstances. So the more you know about a person, the better. And letting them know that you're not just here to gather information, you're actually a human being, and you want to, it's a fair question. How are you doing? How's it going? Yeah. A lot of nodding going on.
Does anyone have any questions, or should I just continue asking questions? I don't want to be the only one.
Never hurt to ask questions.
I think I have kind of a question like more on the topic of leads. So in features, obviously there's like also a lot more room to do that. But would you say that you can like get to a point where there's too much detail like throughout the story, or should you always find places to add detail wherever you can, like throughout the entire story?
So that's a great question. I think it depends. Like the detail needs to have a purpose, right? So, I mean, all right, let's say we go back to like the sexual assault story, okay? And you find out that the guy drives a Prius, but his car has nothing to do with the story whatsoever. Like I always say, like when I write a book, I probably use 30% of the material I get, Jasmine, someone's home, just so you know. Wait, what? I probably use 30%. I probably use 30% of the material, and the rest I throw out. So like, it has to pertain to what you're writing about. Like you want to get as much information as you can about a moment, and then you want to write it, and then you want to smooth it out and smooth it out and smooth it out. Okay, there, Jasmine. Okay, and you want to smooth it out and smooth it out and smooth it out. And it's kind of, you learn with time over judgment, like what to use and what to shed, but you don't need to overwhelm something with information. Like you don't want it to be a ridiculous amount of information that has no purpose whatsoever. Another thing I'll say that's really important, when you go through your writing, when you write something and you're done with it, go back with a pen or whatever, delete key, and get rid of 60% of your adjectives. There's nothing that, especially young writers, but really all writers, do more egregiously than overuse adjectives. So always good to go back / because usually you should be describing something. Adjective doesn't actually usually describe something well. It's kind of a lazy word. So anyway.
One of the things that I've seen that we've done in the past that you've critiqued us on was just having long leads. For example, not long leads, but just long intro like sentences, just how they continued. And we tried to kind of separate those into different, they're each sentence. What is something that you've seen overall with just this academic year's writing that you think we've like consistently kind of done and we haven't honed on enough?
Done well or done poorly?
Poorly.
Look at that. I think all right, this is more of a topic criticism than a, I feel like sometimes the paper, I just think like COVID is the story of a generation. I do. I think it's a story of a freaking generation. And there's so much to tell about this and so much to talk about it. And I feel like sometimes the paper treats it a little bit more like it's a side story or like it's a thing. I mean, it cloaks everything. It just does. It cloaks everything. And there's a million ways to tell this story. And everyone who reads your paper and your work is affected by it. Everyone. So I just think it's like if I go to a news hole here, it's initial provost search narrowed to just one candidate. Sorority recruitment goes virtual. Black History Month is 11 months too short. Professor reflects on disapproval from discrimination complaint. GameStop surges. Stay-at-home order good. Then you go, president receives death threats, blah, 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 blah. And like, I just think there's a lot to tell. And it's like, I would like to see you guys take a story kind of as what we talked about at the beginning of this, and then really dig into it. When I was in college, we did a ton of sidebars. So you have a main story about something, and then you have a sidebar story about the same topic, but a side off, a split off, and a split off, and a split off. So it's like, all right, this is going to be our big story. We're going to do a huge thing about the coffee shop. We're going to have a main story about the coffee shop. And then we're going to have 3 sidebars about how it impacts these people, and these people, So I would like to see more of that. That's as a reader, not as, you're the editor, not me, but as a reader, I feel like there's a lot to be told there.
Definitely, yeah. And I thought one of the cool things that we did last week was there was a No Politics Day event that our civic engagement initiatives hosted, basically asking every single day would be a new prompt about how a day without politics would affect you. So everyone, obviously, all the students were very upset and interpreting it as if the civic engagement initiatives were saying they are privileged enough to imagine a day without politics, so on and so forth. So we report about that in our politics section, as well as someone had reached out to us asking if they could write an opinion. So we had at the bottom of the article linked that, and they connected those.
That's great.
Forth, which I thought was really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm telling you, like if you read the really good newspapers, the New York Times and the Post, they always have stories off of stories, you know, and like editorials off of stories. Like that's a really good approach to it all. So that's good. Very smart. Luke, I will take no more questions from you. All right, I'll take this one. Yeah.
I mean, I have two questions here. I'll just ask them back to back. But first, I've asked you this before a little bit, but you obviously have to do a lot of, not a lot, but just, you know, when you're writing your books, you have a ton of information that people have given you, but you still have to take, you know, some creative liberties in terms of how you frame things, or, you know, how you write something a certain way. And so if you have a story with a lot of detail, you know, obviously journalists see the world through their eyes. And so if you're like trying to describe a scene, something, naturally, some kind of subjectivity might make its way into that. So how do you kind of balance the line between, you know, writing exactly what people have given you while adding maybe some stylistic elements, or, you know, letting kind of that your own viewpoint seep in?
Is that one question? Is that two? Is that both questions?
That's one question, but that was a long question. So
all right, I'll take that one.
Return to the second one.
I don't want to forget it at my advanced age. All right, so that's actually a really good question. When you're writing a hard news story, when you are actually writing a hard news story, you just don't, right? Like you don't want to put yourself in that story. So that's a goal. But when you're writing kind of a feature or a news feature or a piece off the news, I always say like, what you really learn to do over time is become the narrator of the story, and you become more and more of the narrator, right? And it's like at an early level, it's like phrases like if you're writing a story and you're like, you see, the thing about blah, blah, blah is blah, blah, blah. Like that's being a narrator, right? You see, blah, 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 or, and yet, blah, 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 like you using these little subtle things. And as you sort of learn to do it more, you almost become more and more aggressive in your voice and narrating it. And you can be like, let's say you're doing a piece about Jasmine on Zoom, right? And you could be like, her eyes seem lonely. You know, I'm just making this up. No, your eyes do not seem lonely, Jazz. I can't even see your eyes here. But I'm saying like, you could be like, when one talks to Jasmine, she has an air of sadness that reminds one of blank. You know, like when one talks to Jasmine, when one sits down with Jasmine, he's reminded of a statue. You know, he's reminded of a statue at the Natural History Museum. There's a blah, 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 blah to it. I mean, like when one talks to Mike Trout, he can't help but notice the muscles bulging from beneath his uniform. It reminds one of staring at the David or blah, blah, blah. And you cannot help but think to yourself, this is something I've never seen before, right? You can write that in a feature, and that's you being the narrator of the feature, right? Totally allowed. And I actually encourage you guys to do that kind of stuff, to give it a go, to try it. And you will fuck it up all the time just because it's experience appropriate. You don't learn how to do it if you don't screw up doing it. So like you're interviewing some guy, you're writing a feature about someone. When she looks at you, you can't help but think blah, blah, blah. When she talks with a New York accent that reminds you of a Brooklyn deli and a slice of pastrami. Like you can write stuff like that. You should write stuff like that. That's good writing, you know? And again, like go for it. Screw it up all the time. You should screw up. The thing about college newspapers that's important to remember, and most advisors don't say this stuff, I suspect. My advisors never did. You're supposed to make mistakes here, right? You don't want to get sued. So I'm not saying you make mistakes to get yourself sued. But when it comes to writing, when it comes to reporting, when it comes to creativity, you're supposed to suck because you don't get better if you don't try to, if you don't put it out there. You can play it safe and it'll be really boring. But you can take shots, you'll suck, but then you'll have these gold moments and that's how you learn. What's question number 2, Luca?
Yeah, and secondly, different topic, but you've talked to us a lot about our social media presence, and I think this semester we're trying to, continue what we did in terms of social media engagement. But do you have any other ideas for how we can, continue making our stuff more accessible, or get more engagement in that regard?
First of all, I love that you're asking the 48-year-old guy how to be more social media savvy. That actually warms my heart. It's a fair question though, but I'm just saying, kind of feel like I should be asking you. All right, so here's the thing. How many of you guys are on Twitter? Hand? Yeah. Watch this. I'm going to ask this funky question. How many of you have a blue check mark on Twitter? Wait, Sam, you do too?
Almost, no.
Wait, what
did you pay for it? I bet you did.
Wait,
No,
Sam, tell the story.
I'm like part of like an organization, and one Twitter account that I have kind of access to has a blue check mark.
All right, we'll count that. Actually, that's a great story. I'm telling you something, man. The freaking blue check mark is the Black American Express card of Twitter. It actually is. It's so pathetic, but it's true. Anyway, not the point. Okay. So wait, how many of you guys aren't on Twitter? This one? Oh, that's not bad. Number one, I think if you want to go into journalism, it's important to be there. I know that sucks. And Twitter is a cesspool of shit. It's gotten better. I will say, no matter your politics, since Trump left, I have to say, it's become a much more peaceful place, which is kind of refreshing. But it definitely, like, it sucks. But like, this doesn't totally answer your question, Luca, but like, I find so many of my sources on Twitter. If they're not following me, I will literally write them and be like, hey, I'm a journalist, or blah, blah. Can you follow me so I can DM you a quick question? And that works for me, and I'm established 70% of the time. For you guys, it'll probably work 30% of the time, which is great, right? So number one, as a person finding Twitter, it's amazing. And if you guys are, this is important too. This is off topic a little bit. Like, if you're doing a story about blank, a failed coffee shop, blank, COVID something, blank, the local funeral director, blank, you should go on social media and find people from different walks of life who can contribute to that story. And Twitter is a goldmine. You literally just search, Australian coffee shop, and 1 million people pop up, or so-and-so or so-and-so. You'll find a ton of people. So it's really good for that. Facebook is pretty good for that too. I can't stand Facebook. I do think, so I think you guys should all be on, it sucks again. I think you should all have presences on Twitter, because when you're applying for jobs also, they're going to know that they're going to want to know that you're social media savvy. They just are. Does the Panther have a TikTok account?
No, but I've been trying to see if people are interested in doing TikTok, and I don't know if they are.
I'm just like, this is the thing that I do feel passionately about. And I've used this line before, but I know it's true. You guys, it's going to be a very tough job market when you guys enter whatever it is, just by basis of everything. And your job truly is to convince people my age that you know shit we don't know. That's 100% how you get jobs in media. One of the big reasons ways you get jobs in media is you convince me what you can do for me that I, old Cooger, can't do, right? So you should have a podcast. You should have a stupid newspaper TikTok account. Whatever the next social media thing is, even if it seems ridiculous, you should have it. And you should be doing it, because, and you're gonna want to be on a job interview, and they're gonna be like, why should we hire you? And you're gonna be like, because I can tell you the next big thing in media, social media for media, is Bloogablog. It's this app, and blah, 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 blah. You just want to, it's really important. Like, you really want to show these people that you know stuff. And right now, social media is where it's at. As annoying as it is, it's really annoying. That's all I have to say about that. Does that answer your question, Luca? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. This is the awkward staring again. I know you have a podcast, by the way, Jasmine.
Yeah, we have our designated podcast editor as well, Ryan. She's been great. Any other questions anyone might have for Jeff, either relating to writing, finding topics, anything outside of that realm? I know Sam is photography, so I don't know, Jeff, if you have any advice for photography in that scape. We've just kind of been using either unfortunately Zoom screenshots, but actually we've been able to stray away from by using abstracts and creating photo illustrations. Is there anything else related to art or anything like that that you could feel we could improve on?
I really thought when you guys did the chart of, was it the COVID chart?
The timeline?
Yeah, the timeline. Excuse
the
me.
John Eastman timeline.
Right. Awesome. Great. Times a million. Great. That was so good. This is my lame advice. More of that, like more stuff like that is awesome. Photography is not really my area of expertise, so I don't want to bullshit you some great answer that I don't have. But the more, I mean, that stuff, that just looked really good and came off really good. And I thought translated really well to digital medium. So nice work.
Yeah, I know
give
Maddie.
Harry more work.
Yeah.
Again?
We have to give Harry our
Art director.
Art director is the one who made that, and he always kills it. So
yeah, he's great.
Is that a boba you're drinking there?
Angelina?
It's just iced coffee, but this is a boba straw.
Is that from Dunkin' Donuts or is that a homemade iced coffee?
Oh no, I made this.
I feel like I win biggest mug. I always win biggest mug.
Oh wow, that is the size of your face.
Yeah, it's quite a big mug. Anyone else have a big mug here? I don't want to brag, but I have the biggest mug.
I know Maddie has a question as well.
Yeah, this is super general, but I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on opinions. Like what to you makes an opinion like really strong or like stand out against just like an average one?
Great question. And Maddie, I really like your writing, by the way.
Thank
Nice
you.
work. Yeah. Okay, number one, when you're writing an opinion piece, never use I, right? Way too often in college papers, especially, I think blah, blah, blah. That's why I believe, no, because like the strong opinion is Smith should be fired. Not I think Smith should be fired. Smith should be fired. And here's why, you know? I think what I think is really cool, actually, some of my favorite opinion pieces, I don't have the link here, but I read an opinion piece recently about Clifford the Big Red Dog, the trailer to the Clifford the Big Red Dog movie and why it sucked. I think it was on Slate. It was so ridiculously good and sharp and precise. And I just said, I think, so I shouldn't do that. Really good opinion pieces. Number one, they overwhelm you with evidence of why you're right. Like the worst opinion pieces are just, I think Chapman needs more diversity. I walk around campus and all I see are white faces. It's not diverse at all. Without Black faces here or Asian faces here, we're just a white community and it's way too, like, that's terrible. Like, show me the facts. Literally lay out for me. Chapman has X percent white students. That is ridiculous. You know, X year. Meanwhile, 5 miles to the west, UC Irvine has blank amount. This score has this amount. The more facts you can layer in to an opinion piece, always the stronger it is. Always the stronger it is. And I also think I'm a fan of hardcore, like the language of an opinion piece being almost like bam, 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 bam. Like Chapman needs to fire its president. He's been here for 5 years. He hasn't done a damn thing. Enrollment is from here and now it's here. Blah, 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 blah. Like just bringing it hard, I think make really memorable opinion pieces. You know, I don't know, but never, I think, ever. Thank you, Jasmine, for the hand motion. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else before we let Jeff go off and drink the rest of his coffee?
It's actually a little soda mixed with
soda?
coffee. I know soda's terrible for you. Don't be like me. Does anyone here drink soda? Oh,
look at Maddie.
That's even worse.
I'm addicted to Diet Coke. It's really bad. It's bad.
I like Coke Zero more. It's healthier.
Yeah, that's arguable. Really? I doubt that.
Battery acid into your system. It's disgusting.
Oh my God.
I just want to say, by the way, I don't have her here. I would show you, Jasmine. My dog, my poor little dog, she was spayed yesterday. So now she's walking around the house with a cone around her head. It's the saddest thing ever. It's like, why'd you do this to me?
How could you?
Sorry, dog.
That's cute.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys, you can always ask if you know how to reach me and blah, blah, blah. Happy to. But keep bringing it. Just go hard. I know this is a rough. Also, I just want to say you guys have really done a great job. I really mean that. I know it's a shitty semester. I feel bad for you guys. You've been robbed of a really fun year. So write angrily, and write with passion and write with flair, and, just go for it. So,
Definitely.
Yep.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jeff. We will see you tomorrow for critiques over the week.
I can't wait.
Beautiful. Please, if you are a writer, please come join us at 12 p.m. tomorrow. Regular editorial board, we always come at 11:30 to go over updates before Jeff hops in. But
I'll bring
thank
donuts.
you guys. Oh, sorry?
I'll bring donuts.
Virtual donuts. But yeah, thank you guys again so much for coming in. Thank you, Jeff, for shedding some of your knowledge with us. I will be sending out this YouTube link to everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesdays.
All right. See you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.
All right. Be good, guys.
Bye.